Have you ever noticed someone who just disappeared? Not dead, not moved away. They simply stopped responding to everyone at some point. Parents, friends, colleagues, exes, all at once. No explanations, no drama, no farewell letters, and the strangest part, they look fine, maybe even happier than before. Most people react to this the same way. Something's wrong with them. They're selfish. Something must have happened in their childhood. But here's what nobody ever explained to you. There's a very specific psychology behind this choice, and it runs much deeper than it appears from the outside. Today, we'll examine 6 psychological traits that unite people who have chosen to make a complete break from their social circle. Not toxic people. That word has become almost meaningless. Not sociopaths. Ordinary people who at some point made a radical decision, and that decision changed their lives. I won't judge or romanticize this choice. I'll simply explain how it works from the inside. Because if you're thinking of someone specific right now, or thinking of yourself by the end of this video, you'll have a completely different understanding of what's happening. Start with an honest description. There are people who at some point stopped maintaining relationships. Not with one person, not with two. With everyone. The phone goes silent. Meetings stop happening. Conversations end. Sometimes this happens gradually, sometimes suddenly, like a knife cut. From the outside, it looks strange, even cruel. Relatives feel hurt. Friends feel abandoned. Those around them start building theories. He got too big for his boots. She's too wrapped up in herself. Something's wrong with them. But here's what's interesting. These people themselves generally don't feel cruel. They feel relief, sometimes for the first time in years. It's precisely this gap between how it looks from the outside and what's happening on the inside that makes this topic so complex. Because this choice doesn't come from coldness or indifference. It comes from a very specific set of traits that develops over years, often without the person themselves being aware of it. And here is the first of them. Trait 1. Hypersensitivity. Disguised as detachment. This is perhaps the greatest contradiction visible from the outside. People who have cut off everyone often appear cold, detached, as though they don't care. But in reality, it's the opposite. They feel too much. So much that the only way to cope is to control how many people are around them. Psychologist Elaine Aron, author of The Highly Sensitive Person, conducted research showing that roughly 15 to 20% of the population is born with a nervous system that processes information more deeply and intensely than others. They notice more, react more sharply, and tire more quickly from social interaction. This isn't a weakness. It's simply how they're wired. But in a society where you're expected to hold it together, not show weakness, and always be available, this wiring becomes a source of constant overload. Imagine that every conversation feels like standing next to blaring music. Others hear background noise and live comfortably alongside it. You hear every instrument, every beat, and your head starts throbbing after just an hour. Over time, such a person instinctively begins reducing the number of noise sources. Not because they hate people, but because they want to finally hear silence. Cutting off everyone is often not a gesture of rejection. It's a gesture of self-preservation. Trait 2. A history of giving more than they received. The second trait is connected to a pattern that forms long before the break itself. Many of these people are chronic givers. Helped, supported, solved other people's problems. For years, sometimes for decades. And at some point, they simply tallied the balance. Carl Jung called this the persona, the mask we wear for others. The problem is that when a person lives too long solely in the role of the rock, the reliable one, the one who always helps, they gradually lose themselves behind that role. Adam Grant, psychologist at the Wharton School of Business, describes 3 types of people in his book Give and Take: takers, matchers, and givers. And here's what he found. Givers occupy both ends of the success spectrum. The most burned out people are givers. And the most fulfilled are also givers. The difference comes down to one thing: whether they learn to say no. People who cut off everyone often simply didn't learn this in time. And at some point, no became total, not to one person, to everyone. This isn't anger. It's exhaustion that accumulated so deeply, it spilled over into the only decision that seemed possible. Trait 3. An experience of betrayal that altered basic trust. Here we move into what psychologists call disruption of basic trust. John Bowlby, the founder of attachment theory, showed that the early years of life form our fundamental stance toward other people. Can they be trusted? Will they come when needed? Will they betray us? Many people who eventually sever all ties have one or more moments in their history when someone very close did something that overturned this basic sense of safety. It doesn't have to be something dramatic. Sometimes it's gradual and quiet. A friend who shared your secrets, a parent who didn't protect you when it mattered, a partner who turned out to be a completely different person than they seemed. And what happens next? The brain draws conclusions, not rationally. Research by neuroscientist Antonio Damasio shows that emotional experience literally rewires neural pathways. After a serious betrayal, the brain begins to treat closeness as dangerous by default. Not everyone with this kind of experience severs all ties, but those who do typically carry this experience, and not just once. Trait for a high. Need for autonomy. And here is where things get most interesting, because this trait is not a trauma and not a weakness. It's a personality characteristic that, in the right conditions, becomes an enormous strength. Psychologists identify three basic psychological needs: competence, relatedness, and autonomy. This is described in the self-determination theory of Deci and Richard Ryan from the University of Rochester. One of the most well-verified theories in the psychology of motivation. Most people need all three, but different people have different balances. And there are those whose need for autonomy is so high that any relationship which restricts it becomes unbearable. You have to call your mother. You can't just disappear. We've been friends for so many years. Each of these phrases sounds like a chain to someone with a high need for autonomy, not like care, like a restriction on freedom. And when too many of these chains accumulate from family, from friendship, from professional ties, the person simply exits all of these systems at once. This isn't selfishness in the ordinary sense. It's an attempt to restore the feeling of being in charge of one's own life. Trait 5. An introverted style of processing experience. The fifth trait is often invisible until you start looking at the overall pattern. Introversion is not shyness or a dislike of people. It's the way a person restores their energy. Introverts recharge in solitude. Extroverts recharge through connection. Carl Jung, who first described this concept systematically, said, "The introvert draws strength from the inner world's thoughts, images, sensations. The external world is not a source for them, but a place of application." But here's what happens when an introverted person lives within a system of constant social expectations: family gatherings, obligatory phone calls, office parties, holidays. Let's meet up. It's been so long, they are chronically under-restored. Susan Cain, author of Quiet, The Power of Introverts, showed that introverts in modern culture are forced to act against their nature most of the time. And the cost of this is not merely fatigue, it's a deep sense of living someone else's life. For such a person, cutting off everyone is sometimes simply the first time in their life they are finally building their day around themselves, rather than around the expectations of others. Trait 6. A tendency toward the clean slate as a coping mechanism. The sixth trait is perhaps the least obvious. There are people who, in a moment of crisis, activate a specific mechanism, not gradual change, but a complete reset. Not let's talk it through and fix things, but I'll start from scratch. Psychologists call this radical identity reconstruction. Erik Erikson, in his theory of stages of personality development, showed that at certain moments in life, a person experiences an identity crisis. Who am I? What matters to me? What do I actually want? For most people, this crisis passes quietly. You shift your priorities slightly, reconsider a few relationships. But for some, especially if the crisis was long postponed or particularly acute, it expresses itself in radical action. And their social circle is one of the first things they change, because the people around us hold us in our old version of ourselves. They see us as who we were, they call us by our old names, expect our old reactions, remind us of our old stories. When a person truly wants to become different, sometimes the only way that seems real to them is to remove everyone who remembers the old version. This isn't running away from people, it's an attempt to reach themselves. Now let's bring it all together, because this is where the picture comes into focus. When you see someone who has cut off everyone, you are most likely not seeing a strange or broken person. You are seeing someone in whom several things coincided at once. They feel too deeply to spend energy on shallow connections. They gave for too long without receiving as much in return. They have experiences that taught them closeness isn't always safe. They need more space than most. They recharge in solitude, not in company. And at some point, they needed to start over, not because they gave up, but because they decided their own life mattered more than other people's expectations. This doesn't mean it's the right choice for everyone, and it doesn't mean the people around them aren't hurting from that decision. But it certainly doesn't mean something is wrong with that. Sigmund Freud said that mental health is the capacity to love and to work, but he forgot to add a third, the capacity to choose with whom. That, too, is part of maturity. Here's what this understanding changes. If you find yourself on either side of this situation, if you are the person thinking about disappearing from everyone's life, this isn't about telling you what you should or shouldn't do. It's about the fact that you likely understand yourself better than anyone on the outside. But it's worth asking, are you running from people or toward yourself? These are different movements, even if they look the same from the outside. If you are someone who is abandoned this way, the pain from it is real. Don't dismiss it, but try to see it not as something personal, but as a person for whom something became unbearable. Sometimes another person's withdrawal is not a judgment of you. It's their attempt to survive. And if you're simply observing this in someone around you, now you have a different way of seeing it. Not something's wrong with them, but something inside them finally resolved itself. Viktor Frankl, who survived the concentration camps and wrote Man's Search for Meaning, said that the last human freedom is the freedom to choose one's attitude. People who cut off everyone in some sense exercise that freedom completely. Whether we like it or not, to understand is not to agree. But to understand means to stop judging what we simply couldn't see from the inside. If this video resonated with you, watch the next one, where I explore why some people are able to let go while others hold on until the very end.